Bible. Now that title might get you right off, are dinosaurs in the Bible? We'll talk about that as we go along. All right. Let's get some ideas on what dinosaurs were. Okay, we're looking at evidence. Now what we usually find in dinosaurs is this. They're dead and in the ground. Now, I know you've seen the movies where they've been recreated. Not yet, but people are probably working on that, no doubt. All right. What we find is a lot of dead things in the ground. Now, of course, creationists, if you're familiar with this at all, we suggest that most of the fossils were laid down at the time of the flood. Okay. Evolutionists suggest no, that this is millions and millions of years, and there have been various time periods in the past where some animals have dominated the earth. Okay. Dinosaurs, it was the age of dinosaurs. And if you don't know much about dinosaurs, ask any like 8-year-old. Right? Usually they have more knowledge. Sometimes we get to adults, we sort of lose some of that. All right? But there's a lot of things on dinosaurs. In fact, I'm working at a group home right now, and I borrowed this from one of the kids at the group home. This is called Dinosaurs, the Grand Tour. All right? These are fairly technical books, but somehow with dinosaurs, it's not a problem, all right? The kids love to read them and all these sorts of things. Now, dinosaurs have only been known for the last couple hundred years, actually in that way, all right? The gentleman who coined the term, Sir Richard Owen, there he is, over there, kind of scary looking in some ways, maybe, all right? Yeah, he does look scary. I don't know what it is. It's the eyes, that's what it is. And the pose, okay, the sort of that. Okay, he was a comparative anatomist, or he did comparative anatomy. He was one of the first to recognize the animals as what they were. People were finding bones and teeth. Now, people had always found these things, but they hadn't classified them or tried to figure out what they were. As science was going on and building, you had people like Cuvier and Richard Owen in England who looked at these things, realized from comparative anatomy what they most look like, and gave them the name. And from that, everything started going from there. In the first century of dinosaurs, discoveries in the 1800s, these two gentlemen played a big part. I don't know if you know who these are. This is Edward Drinker Cope is his name. All right. And this is Othniel Marsh. All right, there you go. And we say they have dinosaur wars because, well, they did. Okay. A lot of this was chronicled in the 70s in a book called The Hot-Blooded Dinosaurs. All right. So if you want to get the story on that, it's a great little book. You can pick a used copy up, probably on Amazon, really cheap. And these two guys went into the field of paleontology, all right, vertebrate paleontology to be exact. Now, invertebrate paleontology, a lot of people study today. You usually study it when you want to get oil, okay, because you look at the various microorganisms, all that. Vertebrate paleontology is a little bit different. These are the animals that have backbones, and it's usually just to see what the animals are. They don't really have a secondary purpose of, for instance, finding oil and all that. But they're cool to look at. And ever since their discovery, everybody's been wondering about them. Well, these two guys started off as friends, okay? And then a couple of things happened. This guy was digging up some fossils one day, or his group was. This guy found out about it, and so he paid some of these people to send the fossils to him, all right? That was the first straw. And then a little bit later on, Dr. Cope here had put together the first skeleton of an elasmosaurus, all right? At least that's what he called it. It's a basic a plesiosaur type, all right? Nice, big, long with the flippers and all that, except he did one wrong thing. He put the head of it at the wrong end. Well, this guy, when he saw it, made a big deal about it and said, you can't tell your head from your, well, you
tried to buy up.
All right, that was a major insult to Cope. He tried to buy up all the monographs that were out on that already, and from that day, that was it, okay? The friendship was torn. Now, just to give you an idea of what these guys dinosaur hunted like, oops, I went too far. To the end. Okay, we're done, yeah, all right. You enjoyed that, yeah. There we go. This is what a fossil hunting party looked like in the 1870s. Okay, in Wyoming and Colorado. And if you remember, Indians were still there, all right? The Transcontinental Railroad,
That's right.
1869 or so about. So when you went out there, you know, you were ready
Little big
for
one.
all kinds of things to come at you, all right? And so this looks like a, well, it doesn't look like a fossil hunting party for sure. This looks like somebody you go after, all right? But that's exactly what they were. They were looking for bones, Como Bluffs, various different names that we have for these famous fossil sites now. All right, and they would go out there. Othniel Marsh, all right, gentlemen, let's see. No, there he is. He made friends with Red Cloud, one of the Sioux Indians, in order to understand the Badlands and all this kind of thing. So it's not just, you know, going out looking for fossils like we would talk about today. This was hardcore, all right? These boys meant business. And in fact, because they were rival groups, they had a lot of intrigue in there. They would sneak into each other's camps sometimes. Marsh, when he was done with the fossil area this one time, apparently didn't want Cope stumbling onto the same area, so he dynamited everything.
Right.
Yeah, okay, not exactly good technique, all right? They, like I said, they would try and steal each other's things. It was really a mess, all right? And in fact, one paleontologist, a gentleman named Professor Leedy, who was also big at this time, left the field because of all the shenanigans that were going on between these two. And they would send lots of dinosaurs back to their respective museums. Okay, some of them are still perhaps
Still
encased
in boxes.
plaster to this day, because they sent tons back. They just grabbed it as fast as they could, you know, cased it in plaster, and sent them on back. And so the Carnegie Museum has Othniel Marsh's, okay, and I think Yale and some of the others have some of Dr. Cope's. Okay, and they from this, a lot of species were described, like, well, let's see, Stegosaurus. Are you familiar with Stegosaurus? You see the dinosaur movies, right? Everybody knows these. Let's see if I can find a picture of it.
So-called brontosaurus.
Of course it is, yeah.
Dinosaurus.
There it is, Stegosaurus. You remember, that's the one that always fights the T-Rex, right? In the movies, right? And there was a controversy about these for a long time too, because they didn't know how these plates work. They're not fitted into the spinal column, they're just sort of loose in the skin. And so there was an idea that, well, they were just one row or two rows. They've come, most reconstructions now show two rows. They were highly vascularized too, they had little blood vessels going
Radiation
through them.
shields.
And so they think that when they want it to warm up, you know, if the sun is over there, they stand like this, warm up from the sun, they get too hot, they do this kind of thing. They can cool down a little bit like a radiator, all right? That's some of the thinking behind these. Stegosaurus is also famous for two brains, all right? This is the one that has the brain the size of a walnut and a swollen area back here. Some have called a second brain. It's just actually a mass of ganglia, a little bit more neurons back there. And they figured that that controlled the back half. We don't know, okay? We're guessing at a lot of these things, actually. All right, we have some interesting ideas about them. Now, what you'll notice about some of these, well, this guy's got it up, but usually, the older reconstructions, everything is a tail dragger. Okay, dragging him on the ground, all over. And of course, if they did that a lot, they would rip all the, you know, off the bottom of their tails. But these are the older reconstructions, all right? We'll get to why this is going on in just a little bit. All right, where do we find dinosaurs? Well, we find them in a lot of places, okay? The closest place to us is probably Carlsbad. They found some ankylosaurs there. Ankylosaurs are the ones with the big bony tails.
Carlsbad,
California. Found there, okay? But most of the big dinosaurs that we know of and all the fossil finds you can see are more in central United States. There's a lot now coming from South America. China's a big place right now.
Orange County.
They've also found a lot in the Mongolian deserts. They've even found some in Australia. In fact, I was just talking to some of our hosts. They just found the largest footprint today. It was on the Fox News site I got. It's 5 feet 9 inches across. It's a footprint, probably from one of the big boys, okay? One of these type of guys. So you can imagine a 5.
Sauropod.
That's big size, all right? You want to stay away from those, okay? Even though they're plant eaters, that can be hazardous to your health, all right? So we find them all over the place. Now you have to go to various places to see that. They're not spread like in a layer anywhere. You usually go to a certain site and you find a lot of these. And in fact, in the United States, you find a lot of graveyards with these sort of things. For instance, at Dinosaur National Monument, you find them all jammed up against the side of the wall, basically. Looks like somebody dumped them on a washing machine, slurred them around, and slapped them up against the wall, all right? And so you find the bones all over the place. Sometimes you find articulated skeletons, like, and what that means is they're all pretty, okay? So it looks like a roadkill rather than disarticulation, all right? So for instance, up in South Dakota or North Dakota, they found Sioux, which was a big T-Rex, largest one. It's at the Field Museum now. Somebody paid $8.3 million for that baby, all right? So again, if you've got
Disney,
land,
McDonald's.
you've got a dinosaur on your land, take care, all right? That might be retirement money, okay? So you find these things in various places. What we're trying to do is reconstruct what went on there, okay? Dinosaurs are unusual when they found because there was nothing like them that people knew about, all right? Elephants and all that, we understood. But we started finding these babies and it was like, whoa, what is this? All right? For instance, like Ultrasaurus, this comes from Utah. This is one of the biggest boys out there. Some of these are, well, let's see, I'll have other pictures as we go along, are very large, okay? Larger than anything that we see walking around today. On the order of maybe 100, some suggest up to 150 tons of animal, all right? Now, the blue right whale, the largest creature that's around today, we think, all right, is maybe 100 tons. So again, you get something up on land that walks that's maybe 150 tons, okay, be careful, all right? All right, what are the different kinds of dinosaurs? Well, it turns out there are 2 basic types that scientists divide them in. Ornithischian, all right, and Saurischian, which are lizard hip and bird hip. That's what it means, all right? And these are the bird hipped, and they look a lot more like birds, all right? And we'll get into a little bit of that as we go along. And the lizard hips are usually some of the bigger boys, and they're quadruped, or on 4 feet. We have plated dinosaurs, all right? And then you have this kind of thing, but you've got this kind of thing going on. And then some artillery back here, all right? Which, you know, some of these spikes are 2.5, 3 feet long, all right? Wow. What do you use those for? Okay. They're the horned dinosaurs, or what we call the ceratopsians. And there's a whole variety of these, from one horn to Styracosaurus to Torosaurus, and some of these skulls from here to here are about 10 feet. All right, so that's a big animal. Now it turns out it's not solid. This right in here is all open, and it just has a covering over the top of it. All right, some are suggesting these are used for display. And we see that in some modern lizards too. You know, flash things or stuff like that, or different colors. So you can imagine, you know, mating season, you know, he's flipping that thing up and down or whatever. All right, now to give you some idea, this guy's probably, they could be up to like 30 feet long. So we're talking a tank basically here, all right? They get big, they get very big. But notice the variation in there. Now look at this one, what is that all about, all right? And then what I call the big nasties, all right? The T-Rexes, the Allosaurs. And Allosaur and T-Rex, again, if you want to be cool with a 7-year-old, Allosaur has 3 fingers, T-Rex has 2. Okay. Now in real life, let's see if I can find that big picture.
5 fingers.
They're pretty small. Okay. So when you look at a T-Rex, I might have it in here. Oh yeah, that's one of these, that's right. I'll show it to you. Look at how tiny those are, huh?
Night.
They made fun of this in Toy Story too, if you remember the toy T-Rex, can't even reach his head, and all that, remember? Right, that's exactly right. Now, some people think they would dig in, oops, let me get it out of the light, dig in so he could get up off the ground. But of course, if you got a 5-foot jaw with
Those are
6-inch
very
teeth,
powerful arms.
arms aren't really important, okay? If you can grab whatever you want to. Okay, and there's the roughage right here. Okay, another ankylosaur. These are some of the older reconstructions because his tail's dragging on the ground.
Hmm.
Okay, and we don't do that as much anymore. All right.
Track shut
So
that.
T-Rex is the bone-headed dinosaurs. These are the pachycephalosaurids. All right. Some of these have solid bone skulls up on top, like helmets, 12 inches thick. And the way their spines are made, they think they did a lot of this, lining up against each other and going boom. All right, just like some, sheep do and these sorts of things. All right, so there you go. Don't get in the front of these ones.
Wyoming. Lance Formation.
All right, everybody always asks me about the names. Now, the names in dinosaurs are fun because if you know a little bit about what they're talking about, it tells you about the animal. So, for instance, my favorite one is this one. Yeah, all right. Put that on the spelling test, see what happens. All right,
Pachycephalosaurus.
let's try it. Micro means
Small,
pachy,
thick
thick,
skull.
cephalo,
Skull.
head, lizard. So it's a
Lizard.
small lizard with a thick head. That's what it is. And so it's one
It's not a
of
lizard though.
these,
They're not even
but a
related.
smaller size, to a dwarf one that they think they found. That's one of the longest dinosaur names, all right, just to give you a fun. And it tells you again something about the animal. All right? The terrible claws. Now these are more that have been put up in Hollywood
Velociraptor.
lately with the Jurassic Park films. The Velociraptors, the Deinonychids,
Utahraptor.
some of the Utah Raptors. These are the ones that chase the kids from the kitchen in
Dromaeosaur.
the first Jurassic Park.
Oh, yeah.
All right, and they do have long claws that come out the front. They think they were able to sort of manipulate them somewhat. And it's like, wow, what do you use those for? Okay, what is it all about? And so we got different types. Some are suggesting they hunted in packs. Again, we find fossils. Is what we find a living assemblage? Is it just a death assemblage? Were they piled there? Sometimes it looks like they're just all dumped in an area. All right, something happened. You'll hear how the dinosaur died, fell into a stream, floated downstream, and all this kind of thing. All right, maybe. A lot of these places look like they were sorted. Okay, so some groups are here, some groups are here, that kind of a thing. We'll get into that in just a little bit. All right. And then there's some big plant eaters. All right, the big boys. Ultrasaurus, Supersaurus, these were big back in the 70s and 80s when they started finding these. We found some as big or bigger now. Look at the size of, there's a boy, a man, all right? So look at the size of these. Just incredible. Now we do have the bones, so we know they were actually that size. When people first started finding fossils, they didn't know what they were. They thought that's just the way the water, went through the ground and articulated through and made these sort of shapes. Later, people realized these were animals. Okay. Let's take a look at some of these, some interesting features. Some of these have their nostrils on the top of their head. So if they were going to sneeze, they would put it, up here, that kind of thing. All right. Very interesting. When you think from an anatomy standpoint, you know how giraffes have a very large heart. They also have a lot of shunts and things here so that when they bend down to drink, the blood doesn't rush to their head and blow their brains out, okay? They have a cushiony thing up here. Well, these guys are like, 2 or 3 times giraffe size, okay? It'd be nice to figure out a lot of the soft parts. It'd be good if we found one alive, all right? But again, you've got major interesting anatomy going on here if these things really lived. All right? Now again, these are older reconstructions. This is the tail draggers. I'll show you things that people think are dinosaurs but are not. The pterosaurs, okay? Here we go, we got another. Okay? There's a lot of different types here. Some are big, some are little, like this guy's
What's
probably
total?
about this big. All right? Some of them are very big, some of them are
Pterodactyl,
interesting.
very
For instance, this
small.
guy has a lot of baleen, it looks like almost. Looks like he would skim in the water and you know, grab algae and stuff like that. All right? Some are perhaps carnivores. Some look like, well, nightmares, all right? Some of you see on the
They
top
did,
of the
they have
Gothic
sharp
Cathedral.
teeth.
All right?
Very
So
sharp.
a lot of different variation here, and we find these all around the world.
How big is the
Not
biggest?
dinosaurs.
How big is the biggest wingspan?
The biggest one we've got, some
Small
of
airplane.
these, some suggest maybe up to 52 feet.
Quetzalcoatlus.
Okay, yeah, so when he came overhead, yeah, you thought pigeons were bad. Right, yeah.
Drop some shit on you.
Now, for a long time, they said they couldn't, you know, they thought they just sort of, you know, dropped off a mountain cliffside and all that because they couldn't understand how they flew. More and more are coming to realize these babies probably did flap their wings and all that. So there's design problems with a lot of this. 'Cause we don't have birds this big, thank goodness. All right, the largest one we have are the Andean condors, which, you know, maybe 12 feet wingspan or 12-foot wingspan. So these guys are a little bit different. All right. Fascinating, a whole group of flying things like this. All right. So those aren't dinosaurs. Those are flying reptiles. Dinosaurs theoretically are the things that walked up on land, okay, with not 4 or 2 feet, okay? Although these are found with them. The other group that sometimes these aren't dinosaurs either. Okay, you've got the mosasaurs, you've got the ichthyosaurs, which have a lot of reptilian features. That's why they're classified as reptiles. The way their spine connects to their skull and some of the bones in their fins. That's why scientists do this. Now, they might be different types altogether, right? Again, the evolutionists suggest these things, one thing descended from another, and so they have to find where the groups connect. As a creationist, I would suggest that God made a lot of cool things, and some of them don't connect to anything, all right? So you've got, well, look at this baby, the Lazarus. Whoa, all right? Now, they're also, the other group, I don't have a slide for that, but I do have a picture in my older dinosaur book here. There are plesiosaurs, and then there are things called pliosaurs. So they're a little bit fatter and shorter neck, but bigger skull. Right? A lot of crazy stuff used to be in the ocean. All right? Some of them are quite large and nasty. Some of them, mosasaurs, 10-foot skulls, that kind of a thing. You don't want to, that hunts great whites for fun, kind of a thing. Perhaps. We don't know. We just find the bones again. All right, so what do we find? We find tracks. Some of them are big. Like I said today, we've got one that they just found in Australia, 5 foot 9 inches across. This is in Texas. Of course, you find big footprints in Texas, all right? In northern Arizona, you find a lot of these in the Cayenta Formation. It's a little bit north of the Grand Canyon. But if you visit that place, they'll show you it. They've got little signs out there. And it looks like a dinosaur dance party. I mean, there's stuff going all over the place, all right? And you're over there, wow, you thought that, the movie stars' handprints and stuff from Hollywood. Look at this, way before that, all right? We find tracks and trailways a lot of times. In fact, they've dedicated whole seminars or whole conventions of this. This is all on dinosaur tracks from around the world, right? Lots of different trackways, so it's not unusual. Well, it is unusual, but it's not particularly rare. You find this stuff all over. So that points to some. How fast does it take to make these? This is like putting your hand in wet cement. So these layers must have solidified fairly rapidly, it would seem to me, or got covered over or something.
Both.
right? These solve some problems. When dinosaurs were first found, they thought they were more reptilian. Okay, so especially the big guys, they wanted to know how they stood. All right, so you think, okay, reptiles do this. Most of them do that. You know, if you've ever seen an iguana or lizards running around out here, that's how they look. Well, the problem is,
Bipedal.
one of the scientists pointed out, okay, you got the dinosaur like this. Well, it turns out if you did this and looked at the leg bones and all this, their rib cage would actually extend below that. And so you'd have to, you know, they'd have to walk around in trenches. Well, that's probably not the case, all right? And so what they realized then is these dinosaurs are different from modern reptiles in that they stood on top of their legs, like we do.
Stood like mammals.
These trackways also solve that problem, because if they were splayed out in any kind of a way, well, then these footprints would be further apart, but they're on top of each other, okay? So they know now that they've walked that way. So you can learn a lot just by looking at some of the things there that you find in the ground. Now, when they first started finding dinosaur bones, when they had Cope and Marsh going at it, they were just grabbing the skeletons as fast as they could get them. And they weren't looking around too nice. And that's unfortunate because they probably destroyed a lot of information we now go for. For instance, uh-oh, you're in trouble. Dinosaur skin, that's what it looks like. Okay, we know now. All right. We know now that they have skin impressions. When they look around a lot of the fossils now, not only do we see the bones, but a lot of times the skin and the folds of the skin are found there. All right? We've actually found dinosaur eggs. Yeah. All right, yeah, you might as well turn it off. We found dinosaur eggs. I have one of my older books. When they found a big one, they said, well, you know, this is as big as it possibly can get. And then they started finding some even bigger ones. All right? And what scientists were confused about is part of the problem with eggs is oxygen exchange. You know, if you know about chicken eggs and all that kind of thing, there's got to be an exchange with the cell over across the shell. All right. The problem is in a lot of these that there's not enough surface area for the amount of material in the shell. So they started looking closely at the shell, and I'll do an edge-on drawing of this. And they found this kind of thing. Okay, any of you familiar with engines or that kind of thing? This is what radiators are. You increase the surface area by doing this sort of thing. And that's what they found on the surface of the shells. That's pretty cool, I think. All right? A lot of design went into these sorts of things. All right? So we find eggs. We find footprints. We find skin impressions. We find a lot of things. We find stuff that looks like, let's see if I can draw one. It's not very good, but it might give you an idea. No, it's not a dead stone man. Inchworms. They have a special name, and if you know the names, you'll know it then.
Petrified.
Manure.
Petrified poop, that's right, exactly. All right. So yes, we find dinosaur manure. Oh, okay, there's a fossil you want to get. Turns out they don't smell when you find them. All right. But it does tell us something about the animal. We can thin section those, and it kind of tells us what it was
What
eating.
they ate.
All right.
Some of them are made into very nice beads for jewelry.
Yeah. Okay.
Agatized, yeah.
All right. If you want to. Yeah. Okay. And again, it doesn't smell anymore, so maybe it's cool. All right. You find big ones, you find little ones. Again, cardinal rule when you're around a big dinosaur, you know, make sure you know where you're standing, I guess. That kind of thing. It was back then. Yes, sir.
Did the computer die?
Yes.
Is it the battery?
It's by battery. I don't have a plug-in. I left it at home. Okay. So, oops.
Do you have a PowerPoint anywhere else?
I do not, actually. I don't have it on a jump drive. So, let's see, because we have another computer there, right? But we tried to hook in the other one and that didn't work. That's okay, I'll still talk. We've got a lot of visuals here. We'll work through them, all right? As I mentioned before, we find traces of these animals. So how did they live? How did they die? Well, again, when you're talking about fossils, when you're talking about modern animals, how do we classify modern animals? Well, a lot of times you look at their habits, okay? You look at what they eat, all right? You look at mating rituals, all right? You look at variations in maybe skin, types of things, where they lived, some location, all right? Now, there's a problem with some of this, of course, when you look at fossils, because what are you looking at? Okay, things that have been turned to stone, basically. Fossils are generally bone that's been mineralized. The bone is going to be replaced by mineral, that's why they're so much heavier,
Not entirely.
okay?
no.
And in real life, the bones wouldn't have been quite that heavy. And in fact, some of the dinosaurs have pneumatic bones, just like birds. And this is where some scientists are suggesting they're like birds in that way. So habits are going to be hard now, but we have found some. For instance, up in Montana, there are nests. And the nests, whole egg nests, have been buried and fossilized. And they do this kind of rotation thing where they spiral out with the eggs and all that sort of thing. And there's even some suggestion that some of the mommy dinosaurs kind of hung around the nests. We find some of the skeletons there, and the way it looks, it suggests that to us. All right? So we get a little bit there. Now that's a little bit different than modern day reptiles, if that's true. Most modern day reptiles, you know, they lay the eggs and they're done. The kids are on their own. They hatch out, and mom's gone, all right? There's no prenatal care. There suggests that there's some, because what we found are various size, for instance, hadrosaurs, they're bipedal, they're mostly plant eaters, around the nest. So it looks like maybe some juveniles were there and they had some maternal care. Okay, that's a little bit different. Eats. Sometimes we find stomach contents around a lot of the big sauropods. Drop his names. These guys, the big guys. All right. We find smooth stones around this area, just like birds. Gizzard stones.
Gastroliths.
Okay, it looks like they would
Supposed.
take down huge amounts of stuff, you know, just like my kid does.
I
at the
don't
dinner
believe
table,
that.
All right, without chewing, all
Too
right,
many of them.
and then it would grind up down here. All right,
Down
so it's a
there.
bird-like feature. Very interesting, isn't it? Like I said, and from a creation standpoint, I don't have to have solid groupings of animals that are totally distinct from each other. I believe a creator would be creative, all right, if I could do that, and borrow things from different things that worked, all right? So you have that sort of a thing. Gastroliths. We don't know if the big carnivores, like the T-Rex and all that, actually hunted and grabbed other animals. The only thing we've really found in some of this, there's one Triceratops skeleton. Let's see if I can get a Triceratops here. That has, it looks like, yeah, one of these guys, has something chewed into a vertebrae. And maybe there's a re-healing. In other words, he might have been, you know, lunch on the run, but it just didn't work out. It could be that these were also scavengers. Now, from a biblical standpoint, the Bible says that in the beginning everything was given plants to eat, or that's a suggestion in Genesis. It wasn't until somewhat later things started to eat meat. Genesis 9:6 is when people were given permission to eat meat. If that's when animals were doing it, fine. Now, if you started to have death after Adam sinned, and there might not have been death before then, that's what we suggest, then you need somebody to clean up that stuff. And so the big carnosaurs might have been sort of the scavengers of the time, all right? Because they could cut out huge chunks of meat. So we don't have any dinosaur movies that actually show them that. All the ones you see are what people think in their heads. And in fact, dinosaurs in movies go way back, all the way to probably before anybody here, 1925.
Really?
Yeah, there's a silent movie called The Lost World. You have to check it out sometimes.
Yeah.
This is part of what I like about all this. For instance, the guy who first started all this was a guy named Willis O'Brien. He's a special effects guy. First one that did what they call stop motion, where they move it a little bit, take a picture of it. And then later on, we had 1933, the big one, King Kong.
King
Right?
Kong, yeah.
Saved RKO Studios,
Animation.
giant picture of the times. And in fact, everybody now, or for a while there, everybody who did special effects paid homage to the King Kong, because there's a scene in there where he's fighting the T-Rex. I don't know if you remember. It's on YouTube, probably on Netflix. All right, but there's one place where Fay Ray screamed. Oh, she's got a great scream. Okay, it's first scream queen, because sound came in around 27. All right, she screams, and the T-Rex does this. Well, if you look in some of them, the dinosaur movies made after that, you'll see the T-Rex do this. And that's the special effects guys paying homage to Willis O'Brien, who then passed the torch to a guy named Ray Harryhausen. Who did a lot of the cool
right.
movies, all right? And in fact, he's even paid homage to in Monsters, Inc., this cartoon the kids like to watch. They go to a real fancy restaurant, and if you notice the name of the restaurant, it's Harryhausen's, all right? So there you go, some trivia for you, okay? Because what these guys did in some ways is bring dinosaurs to life, right? Nobody knows exactly how they moved around.
Sinbad.
And the older views, they were all tail draggers, and so there's some great movies that have that. The first man who really started to show or visualize dinosaurs was a guy named Charles Knight. And he did some pictures
Artwork.
for the American Museum of Natural History in New York. He also did some, when I was a kid, I went to the Field Museum. I grew up in Chicago. All right? And there's some cool pictures there, these giant murals that he did. All right? And while you can look at the bones and all that, when you see something like that, it fuels the imagination. It's cool, all right? You want one of those, all right, to play with, right?
Those are
Right? And
Pleistocene.
so he was the first one that really visualized it.
Eocene.
Now, there's a lot of people drawing dinosaurs. In fact, one of the people that started all this in the 70s, again, was Bob Becker. He wrote a book called The Dinosaur Heresies.
Mhm.
All right, now, that's an interesting title, isn't it? That has a theological implication, to be honest. And he's a real anti-creationist.
Mhm.
He was for a long time there. But he liked to draw dinosaurs doing all kinds of stuff. In fact, this is a poster of the cover of his book. All right, so rather than slow lumbering like the pictures have had for a long time,
Mm.
this is an
Really
action shot.
museum.
All right, there's lots of stuff going on here. You can almost hear the sound. Okay, and you're hoping the Styracosaurus doesn't get eaten for lunch, perhaps.
Really museum.
So there's a lot of artists now doing beautiful work in all of these, all right, trying to bring the past to life. And the filmmakers are going on. You put out a dinosaur movie, you make 500 million. That's profitable, all right? So you're happy about that. And this is the revolution that started in the 70s. The hot-blooded dinosaurs. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, why the hot-blooded? These are
Red
reptiles, right? Well, that's what we used to think. But there were several lines of evidence to suggest maybe they were a little bit different. One of the evidences was in the bones themselves.
Mhm.
When we looked closely at the microscopic structure of a lot of their bones,
Albertine canals.
very good. Albertine canal, somebody doing. All right, very good. All right. Albertine canal. That sounds like, ooh, that's exciting. Well, actually, no, it's just blood vessels, or a lot of them, in the bone. All right, they were highly vascularized. Looks like they had a lot of blood going through there. contrast to reptiles, which didn't have that kind of thing, all right? In fact, it looked a lot more like mammals and birds.